Hey everybody, welcome to DadsDen Pop Culture. We're doing a movie review today, a movie that's maybe a little obscure. Not many people have probably heard of it. It was one of those films that I just kind of clicked on randomly to see what it was and found that I kind of liked it. Thought it was maybe worth talking about. Universal International presents The Fat Man, and no, I do not mean me. Now, this film is based on a radio series, 341 episodes, sponsored by Pepto Bismol, which seems appropriate. One of many attempts, this film was, to bring a radio detective to the big and to the small screen. You have things like Mike Hammer, Richard Diamond, Counter Spy, Dragnet, some successful, some not so successful. Dashiell Hammett originated the character, but probably had little to do with the writing on the actual radio show. Now, the movie was written by Harry Essex and Leonard Lee. Essex was a reporter before he started writing for the screen. He wrote the 1947 Dragnet film, Kansas City Confidential, Creature from the Black Lagoon, so you know I'm a fan, and The Sons of Katie Elder. And on TV, wrote for Bat Masterson, The Untouchables, 77 Sunset Strip, and I Dream of Jeannie, among other shows. Leonard Lee wrote the Sherlock Holmes film, Dressed to Kill, along with a few other films and some TV shows. The film is directed by none other than William Castle. And before he became the master of kind of gimmicky horror films like The House on Haunted Hill and The Tingler, and I think it's a dandy little film with a really interesting cast. And we'll talk about the actors as they show up. So let's roll through the story and chat about the film. As it begins, we follow a man walking down a sidewalk into a building, past some cleaning women, and to this directory. Events. He's interested in the dental convention and Dr. H.R. Bromley. We next see him knocking on room 1812. A man answers, Dr. Bromley? Yes, what is it? And this stranger attacks and kills Dr. Bromley. The man then rummages around the hotel room looking for something. It's dental x-rays. He finds what he's looking for and he scurries off. Now, before the guy leaves, he pours something into the doctor's mouth, puts the bottle in the doctor's hand, opens the window, and throws the body out from a very high floor. And then he finally leaves. And on his way out, he passes this woman, who we'll discover is the doctor's nurse, Jayne Adams, played by Jayne Meadows, sister of Audrey Meadows, Alice Cramden, and an actress in her own right, of course. She's the one who discovers the crime scene. So now she's seen the murderer's face, and we've seen the murderer's face, and you just know we're in for a twist along the way when they do that in a film like this. Oh, and of course, in the scene we get the door closing, and then we hear the scream. Pretty standard stuff. She is questioned by the police, played by Parley Bear, the detective. She's worked for Dr. Bromley for years. The doc was nervous about a lecture he was going to give the next morning about x-rays. The police detective thinks it was an accident, drank something to relax, was a little bit dizzy, opened the window, fell out. Happens all the time. Jayne disagrees. So she goes looking for help. And she finds it in the form of Brad Runyon. At first, actually, she finds it in the form of his assistant, Bill Norton, played by Clinton Sundberg, who is preparing Runyon's meal. Now, Runyon ain't called the Fat Man for nothing, and in this, you can see a slight resemblance to the character of Nero Wolfe, and of course, his leg man, Archie Goodwin. But there's not a lot of resemblance between the two characters, other than how heavy they are, and they're the love of food. There's a lot of differences. And I like them both, but I really like Runyon. She wants to see Runyon on important business, but nothing's more important to Runyon than eating. Plus, he is in the middle of surgery. The surgery being the carving of a turkey, at least I think it was a turkey, and the assembled chefs are amazed at his prowess. Runyon is played by J. Scott Smart, who played the detective on the radio as well. And we'll mention one of the chefs. It was played by Gino Corrado, who was in one of my all-time favorite Three Stooges shorts, Micro Phonies. Runyon is fetched and Jayne has her interview with him. She announced that Dr. Bromley is dead. Runyon knew it. He'd read the newspapers, and he wonders what that has to do with him. And she tells him that Bromley had an appointment to see him that night. She tells him her suspicions. She thinks she's being followed. She wants him to make sure that she gets safely on her plane back to California. So he sends Bill to watch over her. At this point, Runyon does not think there is a case. Now, I'll mention here that I loved Runyon really the minute he started talking in this scene. Sort of casual and friendly. Not in the least arrogant like Nero Wolfe. Again, no complaints. Big fan of Nero Wolfe. But a solid citizen. One of my favorite archetypes in movies. We've also had established that this is going to be a whodunit with light comedy by this point. Sometimes difficult to do well, but I think Castle and crew, pulled it off pretty well for the most part. By the time Runyon's meal is through, and he's about to enjoy a brandy, Bill returns looking bedraggled. He was knocked out when he took Jayne back to her hotel so that she could send a telegram. When he came to, she was gone. Now Runyon leaps into action, and we will bring up the spoilers. So they hightail it, Runyon and Bill, to LaGuardia, hit the airline lounge, and they find Jayne. Runyon confronts her about leaving Bill behind. Jayne seems a bit stunned here, and I like how they quickly make her a less than reliable character and sort of witness to things, just in the way she acts. She does ask about Bill, and apparently she panicked and ran when the attack happened. Now, Runyon is thinking her hunch might be right. He's going to stick on the case. No charge. He just wants answers. We find out that the dentist was a nice man, helped a lot of people, and there was an x-ray plate missing from his personal effects. And it was for a new patient named Roy Clark. No, not that Roy Clark. We now get this flashback to when Roy Clark first came to see the dentist, and it turns out Roy Clark looks an awful lot like Rock Hudson. This was, I think, Hudson's first film, or close to it, and Castle was pretty proud to have cast him, given the career he would have afterwards. So Clark appeared just as the office was closing. He's got a toothache. The dentist sees him. Several teeth end up being extracted, and Clark pays just $10 for now. Since he's kind of short on money, it's okay with the dentist. He's supposed to come in for a bridge fitting later. Jayne gets his name and address, 4228 West Olympic Boulevard, Wilson's Motel, for those who like that. And I looked it up. It's actually just a vacant kind of lot in Los Angeles, a couple trees. Well, a week later, he shows up looking like a new man. And he's no longer in the motel. He's moved up in the world, pays with a wad of bills extra as a thank you to the dentist for carrying him. He's also got a fancy car with a driver. Must be all those movies he did with Doris Day. But this is the last time that they see Roy Clark. He doesn't show up to get his bridge. The next day, Bromley left for New York and that dental conference. Runyon decides they'll fly to L.A. to take a look at another copy of those x-rays. Maybe there's a clue in there somewhere. But once they get to L.A., they hit the office and start looking through the cards. You get this little sight gag along the way, our Chandler. They discover that the duplicates of those x-rays are also gone. The file card with Roy Clark's name and address, also gone. But they do have the phone number in her phone book. Well, Runyon heads out to the address attached to that number and speaks to the owner of the place, Gene Gordon, and what a place. Kind of a big mansion. He says he hadn't seen Roy for a long time, but he was always happy to help the guy when he, through rough times when he'd show up. Roy stayed with him and his wife for about 3 weeks, and then left suddenly for a job in Kansas. Now, back at his hotel, the Beverly Wilshire, Runyon meets with Jayne again. He spotted a man he thinks might be Roy's driver, or the guy who was driving Roy's car that she saw, working for Gene Gordon. If Jayne can identify him, then Runyon is ready to make his next move. He sends Bill off with Jayne, and Bill's not real excited about that, given what happened last time, and he heads off for a date with the police. He asks Bill if he got him a car. Oh, honey, boss, it's right downstairs. And there it is. So, again, light comedy playing on Runyon's size, and this little car that he's supposed to drive kind of reminds me of a bit in an old detective show that starred Pat McCormick and Paul Williams, with McCormick, who was kind of a giant stuffed into Williams, little car. At any rate, he manages to get into the car with a crowd of onlookers watching, and he's off to see Lieutenant Stark of Homicide. He finds out that Gordon is a known gangster, was involved in all sorts of things with his partner, Happy Stevens, up until 1940. Now, this film came out in 1951, so we're talking about a decade earlier. They've never been able to stick anything on him. Stevens bought into a hotel and casino in Las Vegas, so he's gone. But they have nothing on a Roy Clark. Stark tells him he'll back Runyon up if he can get something on Gordon that will stick. And Runyon then hears from Jayne, and yeah, that was definitely the driver of that car that she saw. Okay. And then we get a little bit more comedy. Runyon gets a new visitor in his hotel, Shifty, who apparently has never heard of Roy Clark. Gene Gordon, on the other hand, forget him. Now that chauffeur, Anthony, he's a two-bit phony. Tony and Gordon's wife have been two-timing him. Runyon kind of suspected this. So Shifty's full of information about sort of the underground in L.A. Never heard of a Roy Clark. Now, during this scene, Bill is trying to keep valuable items away from Shifty. Sure that he's going to steal them, Shifty kind of plays along, and as he leaves, he pulls a silver cup out of his jacket pocket and tosses it to Bill. What I like is that Bill kind of has a smile on his face when Shifty does this. Bill's a little bit, I don't know, a little arrogant, kind of feeding off the fame of Runyon, but it kind of shows that he's really not a bad guy when you get right down to it. And this movie just has a good attitude to it. Now, like I said, Bill's a little bit of a pill, not so much that you dislike the guy, but it also has, that respect that you get in some movies for people who are good at their jobs, even if, the job is being a pickpocket. It's something I like about films when they do that kind of thing. Well, that night we see Tony walk out to the car in uniform, get in, and then get surprised by Runyon, who's sitting in the back seat. Tony plays it cool until Runyon brings up Mrs. Gordon. Guy crumples like wet Kleenex here. Runyon wants to know where Roy Clark is, come across, or he's going to tell Gordon about the affair. Tony says he doesn't know where Clark is, but maybe Pat does, a girl that Clark was sweet on. So Runyon's next stop is Pat Boyd, played by the awesome Julie London. Again, very early role for her. Great line here. You're the first thing I've seen in California that lives up to the advertising. Really like that. They get to talking. Runyon has a natural charisma. I really like Smart in this role, and I really want to go back now and watch, or listen, not watch, but listen to all those old radio shows. But we get a really awesome scene here. Runyon kind of gets her out onto the dance floor, and you could tell she doesn't think he'll be able to swing it, but the guy can move. The movie really endears you to Runyon. He's just a great character. And I think that's important for a film like this. Since you're following him around, watching him question all sorts of people, you got to have a charismatic guy in the lead, and they really do with him. Well, Runyon ultimately asks her for help. He wants to know everything that she could tell him about Roy. Runyon thinks that she's as anxious to find him as he is. Maybe he needs help. Maybe he's in trouble. And this convinces her. So we go into another flashback. She met him when she was getting harassed in a bar by a creep, fell in love with him. It was a short relationship. He seemed to value freedom, getting out, of the mean streets to something better. They decide to get married, but first he confesses that he has done time in state prison and has only been out a short time. But she goes through with it. She loves the guy. Now that's a Sunday. The following Thursday, he was gone. She had that number to the Gordons. They told her that he'd left in a hurry. She thought about going home to Kansas. Notice Kansas comes up twice, which maybe alludes to what he was talking about, a job in Kansas, but decided to wait just in case. From Pat, Runyon then gets a photo of Roy. With that photo, Runyon is able to run down his criminal record. His real name is Ray Shevlin. They got him for a racetrack robbery. Part of the mob got away with $500,000. Roy was wounded and caught. Now, Runyon thinks Gordon was involved, which is why Roy went to him. But why was the dentist killed? He finds out that Clark got along well with his cellmate, Ed Dietz. So why not go talk to him? Well, it turns out Dietz is a real clown. And I mean a real clown, played by the great Emmett Kelly. We get a performance of Kelly. We get to see him actually on stage. And yes, MST3K fans, He eats flowers while he's doing it. If you know, you know. Dietz tells Runyon that Ray, or Roy, was a nice kid. At one point, he told Dietz that his pals outside would see him right once he got out of prison. And then we get another flashback, as Roy tells Dietz about where the racetrack caper went wrong. It involved an armored car hijack, so they kind of use the armored car to get in so that they can gather the receipts from that day. In the process of the robbery, Roy ends up being shot and therefore captured. And we do see that Gene Gordon was definitely involved in all of this. Now, Ed tells Runyon that he doesn't know who else was involved. He got out of prison before Ray and has not seen him since. Now, Runyon gets back to the hotel, and he breaks it to Pat that he thinks Roy's pals got rid of him. And she's distraught. He tells her, go back home to your people in Kansas. He'll keep on the case until he knows for sure. And she says, I guess I just don't rate being happy. It's really, kind of heartbreaking. Well, Runyon's getting close, so Gordon calls his pal Happy down from Vegas. They might need to apply some muscle to Runyon to end this investigation. It all depends, Gordon says, on what Jayne Adams says. And now, once again, we get to see that mysterious man, the one who killed Dr. Bromley, walking into the Beverly Wilshire, heading upstairs. He lets himself into an apartment, Runyon's apartment, looks around. Jayne then pulls up outside the building in a taxi, walks in. Now, before she heads up to the room, she makes a call to the suite, and of course, that guy answers. She tells him, thinking she's speaking to Runyon, that she knows who killed Dr. Bromley. And he says, well, head on up. And she does, and that is all for Jayne Adams. Now, as the murderer leaves, Runyon arrives. Murderer pauses, so clearly he knows who Runyon is, but Runyon doesn't recognize him. So the clues are coming together here for the audience in terms of who committed the crime, if you're paying attention. We next see Runyon at the police station. He checks on unidentified bodies, and he scores. A man killed in a truck accident, burned beyond recognition, meets most of the physical description of Roy Clark. The truck, it turns out, was stolen. Well, Lieutenant Stark doesn't buy this. That's too easy. He needs more to go on it. So now Runyon does a little figuring, which involves buying a toy truck and recreating the accident in miniature to show how it was done. Now, it occurred to me during the scene that Runyon's cadence, while going through the steps of this, really reminded me of Castle's explanation that he would give at the beginning of some of his horror films when there was some gimmick involved. Probably related, since he's the one directing the guy. Well, at any rate, here's how it goes. Clark went to his pals for his share. They decided it's cheaper to just kill him. When they got the call from the dentist, they knew they had to destroy his dental records so the body couldn't be identified. The doctor had to die because he could recognize his own handiwork. Jayne must have seen something, and so was also killed. Well, it's a neat theory, but is he right? Well, Runyon heads to the trucking company to find out what he can. We get an early film appearance here of Marvin Kaplan as the company owner's useless brother-in-law. He was the one driving the truck before it was stolen. And now it gets interesting. The truck was stolen on a moving job. It was full of theatrical costumes that belonged to a guy named Dietz, Ed Dietz. And Runyon finds out Dietz hasn't been to work in a week, left without giving any word. Now, when Runyon emerges from the theater and talks to Bill, somebody takes a shot at him and speeds off in a car, and he recognizes that it's Gordon's car. Now, as you would expect with a guy like Runyon, we don't get a car chase. He just doesn't move that fast, but he knows where the car is going, so he can take his time. They arrive at Gordon's. Runyon is heading in to sort of wrap things up. Now, Bill wants to call Stark, because he's like, if you go in there and they're the ones who did it, you're not coming back out. Runyon says, give me 30 minutes. Not out in 30 minutes. Call Stark. Well, he first encounters Tony, the driver, accuses him of taking shots at him. Runyon then confronts Gordon with what he thinks happened. Basically, that Clark showed up looking for his money, got a small advance, and then Happy had him murdered. Well, Gordon plays it cool. No hassle whatsoever. Runyon leaves. Happy enters. And Happy wants to take care of Runyon once and for all. Now, Runyon thought that Gordon was going to do something while he was there. He's kind of trying to provoke him. Doesn't really understand it. He knows he's missing something here. And Bill brings up the missing clown, Ed Dietz. And that's where he thinks he's figured it out. They head over to see his landlord. He knows nothing, no forwarding address. He called in the moving van while the landlord was out, Wait, moving van again. Okay. So back they go to the trucking company, and it was to be delivered to the Ed Dietz circus in Tarzana. So off they go to the circus. Runyon goes ahead to sort of stake things out, and Bill has a rendezvous with Shifty back at the Beverly Wilshire to get a rifle. So we next see them outside the circus, outside one of the wagons. The idea is Runyon is going inside to confront Dietz, and Bill is going to stay outside. He's going to shoot into the wagon at Runyon and miss, ideally, to help this little plan come together. So in Runyon goes, Ed in makeup, important plot point here, and they chat while Ed removes the makeup. He tells Ed he just wanted to keep him up to date on Roy. How is he? Dead. How'd it happen? Roy had a friend who needed money. And we get this flashback sort of visualization of what must have happened. Ed went to Gordon for a share of Roy's money in exchange for not telling the cops everything. He wants 50 grand of Roy's money. You guys can keep the rest, and he'll handle Roy. And when this little tale is told, we see Ed out of makeup, and the audience knows the truth. It's the guy who we saw commit the crimes. So we have a killer clown on our hands. Runyon continues. His friend knocked him out, got him into a trunk, etc. Into the burning truck. You get it all. Now, honestly, I think this scene would have actually worked better without the flashback. With Runyon weaving the tale, as the make-off slowly came off the clown's face, we'd be watching Dietz' face as the real face is revealed and his reaction. I think it would have had a little bit more tension. Again, this was a very early film for Castle, so, you know, he might have thought of that himself a few years later. Well, Dietz pulls a gun, tells Runyon he has everything figured, or he had everything figured perfectly until Runyon came along. And he does actually have a point there. Runyon keeps him talking, tells him Gordon and Happy are probably after him right now. And then he moves in front of the window. That's the signal, so Bill can take the shot that's going to scare Ed. But we've actually now seen Bill conked on the head by mysterious figures. The shot is taken, though, by Happy, who thankfully misses Runyon. Runyon is a little surprised, though, when there's a second shot. That's when he's like, oh, something's gone wrong here. He covers Dietz' escape with his own pistol, tells him he'll help him with the cops. In the ensuing fight, Dietz shoots Happy, Runyon shoots Gordon, and Dietz escapes into a circus tent. So now Runyon has to talk him out. It's dark. You know, there's this crazy clown shooting at him. The police sirens are getting closer. Runyon and the cops move in from different sides while Dietz climbs up to the trapeze platform. Dietz starts shooting at the sounds of their voices. Runyon and the cops move in closer, and Runyon turns on the lights, blinding Dietz. He takes one last shot at the cops. They return fire, and we get this really nice fall into the net. Castle probably, again, could have wrung a little more tension out of the scene, but it's pretty good. And we get this sort of deathbed confession. All my life, I wanted a circus of my own. I killed to get it. And he collapses. All right. And there we have it, folks. So as we wrap up, Runyon has a little bit of eating to do. Bill's complaining. Stark takes off after Shifty. And he asks his boss, how's that hotel cooking, boss? It's murder. Just murder. And we end on a laugh. So final thoughts on this one. This is every classic detective TV show that we've seen from the 60s through the 80s in a lot of ways. All the tropes are there. And again, it was a radio detective show. It could have easily made a transition into TV, but, you know, this is that period before TV has really taken off. And movies are sort of taking the place of a lot of what we would later consider to be TV shows. You have the programmers like Boston Blackie, like Blondie. This kind of like a programmer in a lot of ways. You can imagine them doing a whole series of Fat Man movie mysteries. It's not a very long film, so you could probably, you know, pare this down enough to get it into like a 1 hour time slot on TV. I really like Smart's depiction of Runyon. He is charismatic, he's funny, he's smart, but it's that charisma. It just really brings you in and really makes the character work. It's a fun little mystery in this one. It's not groundbreaking, but and we could take the spoilers down. But it's enjoyable, and it's like tuning into an episode of a Columbo, of a Kojak, or whatever detective show you want to put in there. There are great guest stars, which again, often you got in TV detective shows. Get early appearances by Rock Hudson and Julie London. Many faces that will be familiar to fans of classic TV and of movies at this period. If you look at it as sort of an episode of a TV detective show, it's really pretty darn good. It's fun. You got a charismatic lead, some interesting guest stars. I suggest you take a look at it. Sometimes the little movies are worth watching. Not every movie has to be a massive blockbuster, breaking all sorts of new ground. Sometimes it's just nice to watch a competent film with some good people in it, and I think you get that with The Fat Man. Let me know what you think in the comments if you've seen this one or if you have any questions about it. I'd love to answer them for you. If you enjoyed this little review, please give it a like, maybe subscribe, maybe share with a friend. That'd be very cool. But until next time, God bless everybody. Please be kind to one another. Have a little bit of fun out there. Watch The Fat Man or listen to The Fat Man. And I will see you again, hopefully soon, in Dad's Den of Pop Culture.